Oh, goody.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marvel Snap video. So today we're going over tonight's new card release, which is Echo. Echo is a 1-cost, 2-power card that reads, after your opponent plays an ongoing card here, remove its abilities. So this will trigger for each ongoing card that your opponent plays in the Echo lane. And we finally have that answer to Cosmo that many of us were asking for months ago, though funnily enough, Cosmo isn't quite as relevant as a part of the meta right now as it used to be, but that could always change in the future. This is a Series 5 release, much like Jean Grey. This is the second Series 5 card of the month. The remaining cards of the month will be Series 4 releases, so a little bit cheaper on tokens. Though this doesn't really matter a whole lot if you are going to be opening the Spotlight caches for this card. And here we can see the rest of the Spotlight contents for this week. Figured this would be relevant to showcase since now that tokens are a bit more of an obscure resource and a lot of people will be deciding to open a bunch of caches to try and get the new card if they like other stuff during that week. It felt pretty relevant to showcase what else is being featured this week with Echo. So we can see the other 2 cards available are Iron Lad and Kang, as well as the respective variants for all these cards that you will get after getting all the cards in your next set of boxes, or get right away in place of the card if you already own it. I think Echo is a pretty powerful effect, however, it reminds me a lot of Ghost. Ghost is also an arguably pretty powerful effect, as we've seen throwing priority is really good in certain decks, like with Bounce. But much like with Ghost, this is a very specific effect, and I think for that reason, it's not really going to be Echo's time to shine right now, and I would not recommend paying 6,000 tokens to get her if that is your method of going after her. Now, if you're looking for Iron Lad 2 and you have some caches saved up, maybe this week is a bit more appealing to you, as I know many players have been really wanting to get their hands on Iron Lad. And then you could view Echo as a bit of a bonus, but that's going to vary player to player. Me personally, I'm actually going to be skipping this card. I have a lot of tokens in the reserve, but looking at some of the other upcoming cards in the months of August and more notably September, I really want to save as many tokens and caches as I can for those later months. So for me, I'm going to be passing on Echo because I just feel like in this current meta, ongoing isn't the most popular thing around. And what is really popular is Killmonger because of all the bounce, so Echo is going to get a little targeted because of that. Maybe that changes a little bit later on in the week with the OTA, but this will be available until the next Spotlight rotation next week. So if you're a little bit on the fence and aren't sure, you could always wait until the OTA update to see if things change a bit. Maybe there's less Killmonger, more ongoing, and then Echo could be a more worthwhile purchase. But yeah, gonna be a skip for me this week, even though I think the card has potential. It's just a little bit too narrow for my liking, at least at 6K. At 3K, I might have taken the plunge, but 6K, just a bit too much to me. If you do decide to pick up Echo tonight though, we do have some day 1 lists to go over. Now, I think the best spot for Echo right now is going to be to defend powerful combo decks. The main thing that comes to mind for me, first off the bat, is Hela. Hela with Invisible Woman has always been a pretty absurd amount of power that you can cheat into play if everything lines up. However, it has always had a pretty fatal weakness to, well, if your opponent has a Cosmo and they put it in your Invisible Woman lane, there's not really much you can do. Now with Echo, we can get Echo down before the Invisible Woman, and we can guarantee that our MODOK and our Hela will be able to go off unopposed even if our opponent does have a Cosmo to try and shut down our plan. So I think that is the kind of deck you really want to be using Echo in, not necessarily just to counter whatever ongoing your opponent is doing just by their general game plan, but more specifically to counter these ongoing cards that would otherwise counter your own game plan. I actually played Hela a lot on my climb to Infinite this month with a very similar list. I think the only change here was I was running Odin over Echo for a little bit of synergy with Jubilee, or if we happen to accidentally cheat out Hela with Jubilee, we could rebuy it with the Odin effect. Actually went a bit better than I expected it to. but I was very surprised at how effective Hela was. Hadn't played it in a while, and it seemed to do pretty well. So the only annoying thing is when your opponent blocks you with a Cosmo, and now Echo enables us stopping that from happening altogether. Next up is another deck that has traditionally had a really hard time getting shut down by Cosmo, and that is a Wong on reveal deck. You don't really see too much of this anymore, and I think part of that is people play a lot of this in the early on ranks when they don't have access to a lot of cards, so people want to play different stuff when they advance their collection level further, but I think it really doesn't get as much credit as it deserves, even though it is kind of a fairly basic deck here, actually having all pool 3 or below cards, many of which being pool 2 or below. So a bit more budget-friendly list here, but we just have a lot of powerful on-reveal cards. Medusa, who was recently buffed, gives us another decent on-reveal for a 2-drop. We have Ironheart and Wolfsbane as kind of mid-range cards. Wong is the big one, though, going to be enabling some powerful combos with White Tiger, Odin, Panther, and Zola. Then we have Iceman and Spider-Ham for early interaction, Scorpion to hopefully lower the power of the opponent's cards to keep us ahead, and then Echo acts as really good insurance for Wong to help prevent a Cosmo coming down in that lane. Also happens to give us a nice body early on for Ironheart, which is an added bonus. Then we have a deck that is a little bit less budget friendly, but one of my more favorite decks of the bunch, and that is a Thanos Valkyrie control deck. So I've always loved Valkyrie control decks. I used to play a lot of them, but one of the biggest issues Valkyrie has consistently had is if ongoing cards are popular at all, she has a really hard time dealing with that. And Echo seems to be kind of the perfect answer. You could even play Echo with Valk on the final turn as a bit of a surprise, or you could get Echo out there early to hopefully set up for a Valkyrie lane later on. But that is one of the cards I think is going to be one of the better combos with this card, as Valkyrie really hated ongoing effects. We have a lot of different ways to break the Valk symmetry here after she goes off, with things like Blue Marvel, Ant-Man, Mojo, the Soul Stone, Angela, just a whole ton of different ways to make sure that we're going to be ahead in the lane. We do end up Valkyrieing. Then Spider-Man helps us kind of limit where the opponent can play as well, so hopefully they have to play into our Valkyrie lane. Also put in Jean Grey for that reason. Jeff has really good synergy with her as well, as it can kind of fill up the lane with Jeff and some stones, and then we can move him out when we need to and play something there to close out the game. So yeah, I'm pretty excited about this list. If I was picking up Echo, this is probably my favorite one of the bunch. We also get Nebula in here, as she can be very powerful with Jean Grey, especially against decks that really aren't playing a lot of cards per turn. Get that Nebula down early, then Jean Grey in another lane, and Nebula can get out of control really fast. And then, of course, Armor, I think, is kind of a must right now in any deck that runs a lot of 1-drops, as Killmonger, very prevalent card in the meta and can do some pretty devastating things to our deck of 1-drops. And then last but not least, a little bit more simplistic of a deck, but we have the classic Sandman ramp list, just running Echo in place of Ham or Iceman as the 1-drop. I'm not entirely sure if Echo is going to end up being better or not in this list. You could also consider Wong in this list if you want to go more in on the Black Panther combo. Maybe that gives you a bit more Echo value in protecting your Wong. Personally, I'm a bit more of a fan of the Jubilee for ramp and potential Odin high roll, but that just comes down to personal preference. Nonetheless, I think it will be interesting to experiment with, but I'm not too sure if it's going to actually end up being better than the 1-drop options we already have for this deck. And there we have it. That is going to wrap up our day 1 decks for Echo. I'd love to hear what you think about this card in the comments below. Are you picking it up? Are you opening caches for it? Are you skipping for another week you're looking forward to? Let me know in the comments, and as always, the decks will be linked in the description if you want to import them into game. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.